Greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. Well, we are finally here. Are we here? We might be here. Congressional UAP UFO hearings set for Wednesday, July 26th, 2023. As of this recording, that is tomorrow. It's an interesting point that we have gotten to, those of us in the UFO community, the UAP community, that have been plying the area for many, many years, decades and generations going by. Will we have disclosure? Is it going to happen? And I wouldn't say we're going to have disclosure on Wednesday, July 26th, but we are having congressional hearings on the matter, which is something almost unprecedented. Not exactly, but it is an unusual thing. Before I talk about what I expect we're going to be looking at tomorrow, I just want to give a little bit of a historical background to this entire situation here. When you hear that there has never been anything of this sort in American history, well, it's almost true. There was a UFO symposium back in 1968, if you can believe it. I've got some pictures here of some of the interesting folks involved for that. This was led by a congressman named Roush. It had a number of folks involved: J. Allen Hynek, Dr. James McDonald, Dr. Carl Sagan, and a number of other individuals who did testify in a hearing for that day. They gave their testimony, and it was kind of interesting. This is way back in 1968, and the conclusions for that were that you had a couple of people, very, very strong pro-UFO attitude, most notably Dr. James McDonald, who stated that the UFO, the extraterrestrial position for UFOs was the least unsatisfactory position. Well, the committee did not accept McDonald's position, but it also did not support the National Academy of Science at the time, which said that extraterrestrials were the least likely explanation for UFOs. So they, at the end of the day, they basically took a middle road. They said, well, ETs are not the least likely, but it's not the most likely. Who knows? That was their conclusion. They just decided, let's have a little moderate, ongoing scientific study of UFOs. We can continue this at kind of a low level. Doesn't need to be a big thing. In other words, the symposium, while it was before Congress, it did have a number of very prestigious individuals involved. Certainly made no breakthrough whatsoever. And I think it's fair to say it was pretty much forgotten in the public memory, basically 100% forgotten. So there was that. Now we have something a little bit different. This is being led by these two members of Congress, Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna, both Republicans. Burchett's out of Tennessee, Luna's out of Florida. And this is the hearing set for July 26th. And they've only got 3 individuals scheduled for this, as far as I can understand. These are very well-known people to the UAP, UFO community at this point. They're most notably, I think, the most recent new voice and face to this is David Grusch, formerly of the U.S. Air Force. And definitely we can call him a whistleblower. And that is, I think, a phrase that's sometimes overused, but I don't think it's misapplied in his case. Let me talk about Grusch a little bit first, because I think he is actually, in some ways, the biggest wild card for the hearing. Grusch, as many people following this field know, publicly has claimed that unnamed officials told him that the United States federal government has a very, very secretive UFO crash retrieval recovery, or UFO recovery program, we could say, and possesses non-human alien craft and dead bodies, dead pilots, alien, presumably extraterrestrial. He has made this statement. It's a heck of a thing to say, particularly for Grusch, who, has significant classified, significant clearances, doesn't seem to have a shortage of individuals within the classified world who have a great deal of respect for him. And so that's what he has to say. Now, Grusch, made a couple of other actually interesting statements. So essentially what he stated is that about a year ago, he filed a whistleblower complaint with the U.S. Office of the Intelligence Community Inspector General. So that makes him a formal whistleblower because he actually has gone through the whistleblowing complaint process. And this was all to help him share his classified information, not with the public, but with the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, where he said that he was being essentially hampered in doing so. And then he also filed a complaint alleging that there was retaliation against him by his superiors over another complaint, a similar complaint, I guess, that he'd made the year before in 2021. He said a couple of other things that were very interesting, both in his interview with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal in the debrief, and then with journalist Ross Coulthart. Grusch, one of the things he said is that he claimed to have seen documents relating to an Italian or a crash of a UFO or recovery of a UFO in Italy during the days of Benito Mussolini. We're talking 1933. What's interesting about that is that this is something that actually has been discussed in Italian UFO research, most notably the very esteemed researcher there, Roberto Pinotti, who has looked into this quite extensively over the years. And so here we have Grusch discussing this as well from his own perspective. And I just think that's an interesting statement because, frankly, when the Italian claims first came out a number of years ago, probably like a lot of other researchers, I was wondering, could this really be true or not? You always have to wonder about claims of crash retrievals. But I respect Pinotti, and also you look at the documents, and I don't know if they've actually been 100% confirmed, but they do, to me, I don't have them here to show you, but they do look like they could be quite legitimate. And so it's an open question. Anyway, it's interesting that Grusch has come through to make that statement. He said a lot of other things. There's a number of craft, he said, that the U.S. government and contractors are in possession of, and so forth. So it's really high-level, powerful statements that have not been made, to my mind, by anyone of a comparable stature in the past. So at least in terms of specificity of what he's saying, and then also in the being able to confirm his own background within the intelligence community. So that's definitely interesting. And I made a couple of other interesting points, like individuals that he talked about or who spoke with him, who had concerns about this program, stating that some American citizens had been killed as part of the UFO cover-up. Of course, this is definitely something that has been discussed in research circles for many years. This is a long list of suspected foul play and so forth. So here's Grusch coming out with that. Now, it's interesting to note that the Department of Defense has denied his fundamental points. No surprise there. Also, NASA, too, have come out with their own denial, saying things like, well, there's no evidence of extraterrestrial life. There's no evidence that we have possession of alien tech or alien bodies and so forth. So I think those are quite predictable denials. And again, this is a theme I'm going to come back to while I'm chatting here, but we are looking, in my view, at a factional war, a factional battle that has been taking place behind the scenes. And this has, in fact, been going on for, I think, a long time. So as a result, I think, of Grusch coming out, he's really the key in this. I think this is really, it's fair to say, has triggered, first of all, the hearings for tomorrow, which are under the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. That's the formal office. And through that, we have Burchett and Luna leading this hearing to have Grusch and then Fravor and Ryan Graves speak. Now, just a little bit about Fravor and Graves. I think they're very well known within the community. Obviously, as far back as 2017, David Fravor has been well known. He is, of course, the lead pilot involved in the November 14, 2004 encounter of the USS Nimitz, the famous Tic Tac UFO encounter, where he was leading a group of F-18 Super Hornets going in, vectored in to check out, essentially, bogies that had been detected for quite some time. Before then, they're out doing maneuvers. This is off the southern coast of California, and Fravor and another aircraft are going in. He sees what he describes as a big thing that looks like a 40-foot long Tic Tac right over the water. Very well-known case by now. He goes in, it comes up and zooms off. And it was essentially out of sight within 2 seconds. The estimated speed on the departure of that thing is anywhere from 10,000 miles per hour on up. And clearly very, very, very fast. And then you have Ryan Graves, very similar, another Super Hornet pilot. In his case, a decade later, 2014 to 2015, a series of encounters off the USS Roosevelt, off the eastern U.S. coast. In particular, what was interesting with Ryan Graves, this was written about, again, by Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal in the New York Times, I think in 2019. And one of the things that they pointed out is that the crew of the Roosevelt doing maneuvers encountered almost daily UAP, UFO in their work. So for a period of what looked like 9 months or more, you're talking almost daily encounters. Are we talking 100, 200 encounters or more? Based on what they reported, it would seem entirely possible. We really have not gotten a full number of that, but apparently there were quite a few of these encounters. One of the things Graves famously discussed is in conversation with a colleague of his. This was not Graves' direct witnessing, but one of his colleagues described a black or a dark gray cube inside of a clear sphere. So you could see the cube inside this relatively clear-ish type of sphere that flew between two Super Hornets. And the pilot said, I almost hit that thing. So this was a definite, like, first of all, you have to wonder, what could this thing be? What would allow a shape like that to be able to fly in the manner that it does or did? That's an interesting thing. We don't really have, as far as I can tell, a good explanation for such a performance as that. But obviously this thing was pretty darned sophisticated to fly between two Super Hornet aircraft like that. Come on, these guys are right off the coast. This is U.S. military encounters, activity going on, and this thing just goes right through the two of them. So I think what we can expect is, I think Fravor and Graves will tell those stories to the committee. I think we can expect that. I would not expect them to have anything new specifically to say, although you never know. It'll be worth, finding out if they do. But my expectation is that they will probably repeat what they have already been saying in public for some time now. And as far as I'm concerned, that's wonderful. What I think is new, when I was, you look over the, I mentioned the 1968 symposium or hearing from all those years ago. That symposium did not have direct military witnesses speaking to members of Congress. So this is a kind of a unique and interesting development here, where we do have that. And you listen to Fravor, you listen to Graves, it's going to be very difficult for skeptics to impugn those two gentlemen. I think essentially impossible. So they're strong witnesses. They have a lot of respect. They have a lot of integrity within their profession. And it's just not going to be a very easy task to try to take them down in terms of credibility. So I think it's going to be a very, from a UFO information point of view, getting the information out to the public, it's very good. I would say that they're doing what they do. But again, I think the wild card potentially will be Grusch, whether he drops any tidbits publicly that he hasn't already. Now, even for Grusch, I think this is going to be difficult, I would think. Look, he is bound by very significant secrecy protocols. The things he told Leslie Kean or Ralph Blumenthal with the debrief, or the things he told to journalist Ross Coulthart, that is one thing. We know that he has said more than this to the Senate Intelligence Committee in closed briefings. I presume that these hearings will have a in-camera or closed portion to them. If so, we can expect Grusch to perhaps say the same thing that he has said before. It's not clear to me that he has the ability to say more than he has said publicly up until now. But even if he doesn't, I think it would be a very positive development for him simply to restate what he has already said before this committee. It's interesting. A lot of, I think, what will happen is in the aftermath of this will really depend on, in the short term at least, how the major media wants to cover this. You're in the UFO community. It's fair to say you probably live in a little bit of a bubble. We often forget that most of the world, even now, is mostly oblivious to what has been happening. I'm constantly amazed. I have friends who are not in the UFO field. I'm just friends with them. We'll chat every so often about this type of thing. And these are, very with it people. They've got active careers. They have a lot going on in their lives. And they don't know what has been happening almost at all in the UFO UAP arena. So, it's one thing when you're in the UFO field and you get some kind of bombshell information and your inclination is to think, this is going to just grab the world by storm. Not necessarily. It really all comes down to how this is covered. And up until now, there has been some coverage of this, even in the major media. That is true. I would say most of that coverage lacks sophisticated context. You hear mainstream discussions of Grusch, for example, and frequently, even now, they're not really talking much about his claims of bodies or his claims of the acquisition of exotic alien technology. A lot of that's being soft pedaled, to my mind. So the message is definitely being tamped down to some extent by the mainstream media, and you have to really wonder. I mean, look, there's a war going on in Ukraine. There's, one side of the aisle is trying to throw Donald Trump into prison for the rest of all time. The other side's trying to get Joe Biden and his son and get them in. We've got all of these political machinations going on. There's financial crises. There's all kinds of other craziness in this world happening. And you really have to ask yourself, how significantly will the UFO subject break through all of that to get the kind of coverage that many of us feel it deserves? Fair question. Don't have an exact answer to that, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But I would say the disclosure momentum may still be a long time coming. However, there is another side to this. I just listened to a very quick interview recently with Chris Mellon. He was on News Nation, interviewed by Chris Cuomo, who's over there. A little bit of a surprise. But Mellon was interesting. And, the most important thing he said in that interview, it's quite recent, is that this is a process, what we are seeing. So his point was, don't expect everything to happen all at once. There is step by step going on here. And in fact, if you've listened carefully to Mellon, he has said this all along. And Chris Mellon is someone you want to pay attention to. He has been behind the scenes more than any other individual, I would say. Christopher Mellon, I think, is the number one person responsible for moving the UFO issue forward in the public since 2017. More than any other single individual, I would say. And, there will be a day when we have a much more full, complete picture of this entire scenario that has started even before 2017. And I think when that is fully said, all the pieces are in place, I think it will be fair to say that Christopher Mellon will have played a very significant role in what we are seeing now. So a process. So I think his message is, don't expect the world just yet. Don't expect full disclosure just now. Let us step by step walk our way through this and see where it leads. Perhaps that's true. But what I will, again, emphasize, this is something I have been saying now pretty much since 2017, definitely 2018, is that we are seeing a factional battle. Maybe a war is a better way to put this. If you're missing this aspect of the story, then you are missing the main story. This is the main thing going on here, is that we are looking at factions within the national security state. 50, 60, 70 years ago, this man, Donald Kehoe, was talking back in the 1950s about the secrecy group. Yes, there is a secrecy cabal. They exist. Do they control everything? How much does this secrecy cabal actually control? Everything at all times? No, I would say they don't control everything at all times. This is, I think, the opinion of some analysts out there, that everything which has come out, particularly since 2017, is essentially a ruse perpetrated by the people pulling the strings, the puppet masters. I would challenge the realism of that notion. I think, on the one hand, you want never to underestimate the willingness and also the ability of that establishment, including the mainstream media, to mind control, mind job the public, and to keep it docile. Absolutely. Especially when we see bipartisan efforts on something, which we are seeing with this UAP thing. However, it still does not mean that there are not opposing factions, and that there have always been. Kehoe discussed this at great length back in the 1950s and 60s. There was the secrecy group and those who opposed the secrecy group. I don't think it's fundamentally different today. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that those people who are on the opposing side of the secrecy group, that doesn't mean that they're revolutionaries who want to take down the system. Chris Mellon is not a revolutionary who wants to take down the system. David Grusch, David Fravor, Ryan Graves, they are not revolutionaries who want to take down the system, as far as I can tell. I think these are people who believe in their government, they believe in their system, but they also believe, seems to me, that the UFO subject does deserve a better hearing in public than what it has been getting. And this is a theme that we've been seeing for years and years within the military. Pilots and military personnel have encountered these objects for generations and are slapped with secrecy orders that they are not permitted to violate. And there's story after story indicating just how frustrating this is for many of them who don't believe in it. They take their oaths, they honor their oaths, but it doesn't mean that they believe that the secrecy on UFOs have been legitimate in their opinion. It's been strong disagreements for years and years and years. And I happen to believe that is partially what we are seeing here. So just because you have different, you have a dominant group, a secrecy group, does not mean that all members of that establishment always agree on major policy issues at all times. And that includes the UFO cover-up. And this is why I think folks like Donald Kehoe many years ago were talking about the secrecy group and those that opposed it. Back to the hearings. I think we're looking at something I've been calling the red line of disclosure for quite some time. What is the red line of disclosure? To me, very simple. Evidence of crash retrieval. This is Grusch's area here. This is the stuff that David Grusch has talked about. Acquisition of exotic tech. Lou Elizondo has basically gone there as well. If you recall, back in 2019, Elizondo did a very, very interesting interview with Tucker Carlson when Carlson was still with Fox, talking about Carlson's last question to Elizondo was, do we have any of these things? And Elizondo initially was not going to say anything. He said, well, I've got NDAs. I can't really talk about this, Tucker. And Carlson was ready to walk away from it and let it go. And then Elizondo said, but to answer your question, yes. Boom. Back in 2019. And that was the end of the interview. So Lou Elizondo's gone out there and he has made a few public statements that have essentially gone right back to that place. Now you have Grusch. So there is this motif out there, more than a motif, claims out there that the United States federal government and or private contractors working for the Department of Defense contracting, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, the rest, have acquired, how else do we put this, alien craft, flying saucers. This harkens back to the Davis-Wilson notes that came out in 2019 also. If you've been paying attention, you know that Admiral Thomas Wilson, way back in the 1990s, went on his brief chase after special access programs dealing with ET tech and found actually several such programs, spoke to the controllers, the gatekeepers, as he called them, of one of those programs in person. And they said to him, we have a craft. We have been trying to figure this out. Painful, slow progress and so forth. Not made by man, not by human hands, not of this earth. Wilson told this in a private conversation to Dr. Eric Davis a few years after that. Those notes were taken. I was shown those notes way back in 2006. They finally made it public in 2019. And it's a fascinating story. But what you get with that also is this scenario by which you've got private contractors deeply holding in deep secrecy significant alien technology. And I'll just say, many years ago, when astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell was still alive, he told me personally and said publicly more than once that he knew not simply of the existence of alien tech in possession, being possessed by the U.S. private contractors, but also alien bodies. Mitchell said this to me back in Roswell, New Mexico in 2004 when I spoke with him about it, and made this statement publicly it was quoted in newspapers over the years. So this is a motif and a series of claims that started long before Lou Elizondo and David Grusch. I mean, heck, you really want to get into crash retrieval stories. There's the outstanding research of the late Leonard Stringfield, someone that I have talked about many, many times on YouTube and on my website, Richard Olin Members, and elsewhere. Stringfield is the OG of UFO crash retrieval research by far. There's Stanton Friedman, but it's really Stringfield who spoke to scores of individuals, direct and also indirectly through the spouses of deceased individuals and so forth, who had stories about crash retrieval of UFOs, alien bodies that held at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and elsewhere. Stringfield's collected testimony is absolutely essential. In fact, over at my website, I've done a series of descriptions of Stringfield's various accounts, and it's kind of an ongoing thing that we do there. But my point is, this is a very extensive subject, far beyond what we get with statements by Lou Elizondo or David Grusch. So the real question is, this to me is the red line of disclosure. If you get an open acknowledgement by an authoritative voice within the United States government, the president, some other high-level person, you get that. An admission that, yes, we have some of this technology. That is something that, in my view, I've continued to believe this, would make it very likely to see an unraveling of many aspects of UFO secrecy that has happened over the years. It's one thing for the government to say, well, yeah, there's something out there. We're going to look into it. Yeah, it looks like this whole thing started back in 2004 with the Tic Tac. Gee, we didn't know there was any UFOs back in the 20th century. That's the kind of attitude you're getting here. It's one thing for them to say that. There's a new thing out there. We're going to investigate it. We'll get back to you. It's an entirely different thing for them to say, oh, yeah, we've had their stuff for a long time. Because if that admission happens, it's an admission of lying to the public. There's really no other way to paint that picture. They have lied to the public. Someone powerful, some powerful, important group within the United States government has been managing a lie for presumably an entire human lifetime. Let's go back to Roswell, if not before. You got Grusch's claims now about Italy, 1933. Long time. So For the government to admit a lie of that magnitude, of that duration, have we really begun to wrap our heads around this yet? Like, it's really a good idea for us to start to think about this now. Those of us who've been in the UFO field for a long time, yeah, it's easy to kind of forget just how big a thing this is. Lying for 80 years about what? ET here on planet Earth? It's kind of a big thing. And for that long a period of time, how could that even be possible? You talk to skeptics about this for years and years, and they're like, the government can never hide something like this for that long a period of time. To which I and many other people would say, well, that's BS. They certainly could. They lie about things all the time. U.S. government does not act in good faith. They do not say things in good faith, and they certainly have not done so relating to UFOs. But it wasn't an argument that skeptics were very much persuaded by. So if you get a situation now in which the United States government says, yeah, we were fibbing a little bit. We were hiding the truth in one way or another. Well, let me just say this once again. Sound like a broken record, but we are in an era in which you are not supposed to believe in conspiracy theories. Those are considered wrong, bad, don't do that. How well will it go over if in that environment, the United States government now essentially cops to having lied to the public on aliens for 80 years? Are you kidding me? How do you get to have a bigger conspiracy than that? Maybe there's JFK. I'm going to talk about him in a second. I don't think even JFK's assassination is bigger than the UFO cover-up. How can it be? Aliens here? Come on. No, I don't think there's anything bigger than that. So if they admit to that type of a conspiracy, it might just, open the door in the public's mind to some other conspiracies. Do you think people might just wonder, oh, wow, you lied about this for 80 years. What else have you been lying about? Yeah, there's quite a bit, I think, that likely can come out. So that's the red line of disclosure. I think we can expect Grusch to discuss from his perspective, the reality of acquisition of ET tech. And the real question is going to be, how well will this go over? How much will this be covered by the mainstream media? And what repercussions will happen within Congress and beyond Congress as a result of that? So that's the thing that we really want to be looking for. Will they cross the red line of disclosure? And then doing so, how will that be covered? Because if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did it really make a sound? That's what we have to wonder. Now, I want to talk about a couple of other things here, not related to the hearings, but related. I mean, this is Chuck Schumer. He's the Senate Majority Leader. So the hearings are taking place in Congress. This is now the Senate. Chuck Schumer is a Democrat. So, I'm saying Burchett and Luna, they're Republicans. But you have Democrats involved in this as well. Schumer is throwing his support weight behind a bipartisan legislation that would declassify government records relating to UFOs or UAP. By the way, the acronym for UAP has gone through so many permutations. So it was, you had UFO, unidentified flying object, which to me is a perfectly serviceable acronym to this day. But you have UAP, which has been around since around 1980, which initially was unidentified aerial phenomena. It's actually been changed by the government to unidentified anomalous phenomena, if you care. Just, stay up on your acronyms. But what Schumer did is the legislation that he has proposed would amend the NDAA, that's the National Defense Authorization Act, and require the federal government, listen carefully to this, to collect all records relating to UAP and to make them immediately available to the public unless a review board offers legitimate reasons to keep them classified. Now, that sounds great. It could be. The thing is, it's been explicitly modeled after what happened with JFK. So back in 1992, you had the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act. And that act ordered all files related to Kennedy, to the assassination, to be released by 2017 by the National Archives, which actually did not happen, but most of them, or many, were released after. We are told all but 1% have been released. You talk to JFK researchers about that, by the way, and they will tell you, yeah, a lot of those documents have still been heavily redacted, are still, the good stuff is still not out there. Because honestly, who in their right mind who's ever looked seriously at the Kennedy assassination doesn't think that there was a conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy? All right. The records that have been released do indicate some shaky activity going on, shenanigans, we might say, but it doesn't, there's a lot that's missing. And so, 1% may not sound like a lot, but when you have a massive amount of documents and you take out the most sensitive 1%, maybe it means something. And this UAP legislation is explicitly modeled on the JFK situation, which, by the way, last thing I'll say on the JFK, that came out in 1992. And if you remember, this was the time when Oliver Stone's movie JFK came out. And that is what caused that whole ruckus. And really what you saw was, in a sense, Oliver Stone acted as a JFK whistleblower in a way, creating a very interesting movie dealing with the conspiracy to kill the president. And as a result, this thing came out of Congress to promote the release of the records. And it's a mixed bag. And that could very, very well be the same thing here with the UAP scenario. But here's something that Schumer said. Let me give you a bigger screen so you can read that along. This is a heck of a statement, I have to say. I am not one to trust any of these politicians as far as I could throw them, but to have a United States senator make this following statement is really quite remarkable. Schumer said, "For decades, many Americans have been fascinated by objects mysterious and unexplained, and it's long past time they get some answers. The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena." He said non-human intelligence. "We are not only working to declassify what the government has previously learned about these phenomena, but to create a pipeline for future research to be made public." That is a heck of a statement. I don't know if he wrote that or who put that together, but it's worth pointing out, Schumer, this is something that I have not really followed his career all that carefully, I'll just say, but you learn over the last few months, he was very close to the late Senator Harry Reid, who, of course, was essentially the godfather of the OSAP and ATIP programs back in 2007, 2008. Clearly very close to Robert Bigelow, very close to the whole, what became TTSA. So Reid is no longer with us, but here's Chuck Schumer making some very forthright statements about UAP, UFO. It's very interesting. And the other thing that's interesting here is you've got a number of other senators, there's a picture of some of them, who are throwing their support behind this amendment. Actually, the Schumer, this is on the top left there, is Senator Mike Rounds. So he did a proposal with Schumer to set up a master declassification commission. This is the whole Schumer thing. The other thing about it is that it's timed to report back from, if I'm understanding this right, from the office of the president to report back to the nation no more than 300 days after this whole thing has gone through. So the best estimate that I am looking at puts this to maybe the autumn of 2024 if it goes through, because you have the authorization of the NDAA, and that would give you 300 days. So that could be late September of 2024, right before election time. That's interesting. Now, we can assume, if this is so, and if I'm correct in thinking we're looking at a factional war going on, that there's going to be ample time for, as Donald Kehoe called the secrecy group and the mainstream media allied with it, to prepare a narrative. Or perhaps we could say ample time for a potential battle royale to take place behind the scenes. Will there be a new official narrative coming out of the White House, out of the government, before the coming next election, 2024? Will that happen? I'm starting to think they're going to have to disclose something more than what we have right now. I could be wrong, but it is a very interesting thing. This is something where a few months ago I was really not expecting a whole lot to come out of the United States federal government on UAP. I'm going to freely admit that. I was very skeptical that anything of value would come out. And I'm still of no confidence in their goodwill or honesty about anything, literally anything. And certainly that includes UFOs. But that doesn't mean that information won't come out if it's forced out. Again, you got folks saying, well, this is all a ruse. This is all a U.S. intel community op. And what I'm going to say is that, no, this is a factional war. Now, why? I don't have the answer to this question, but why would a number of members of Congress and senators make such forthright statements? I mean, you listen to Burchett, for example, and his distrust of the Pentagon on this is very crystal clear. And frankly, when I hear this man talk about the issue, I think I agree completely with what you are saying, which is a very odd thing to listen to any member of Congress, and I'm thinking I agree with you. But I do think that his statements have been very on point. And even Schumer, who I'm not a fan of particularly, but when I hear what he says here about UAP and UFOs, I think, yes, why? What is going on? Is there a long game being played here? And I'm just going to say, I don't know. I'm not inside their head. And but I do think when I listen to Burchett particularly, my take is that this guy actually means what he says on this matter. I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, well, I'll freely admit it if it comes out that is something different. But this is my sense. I think there are people who, for whatever reason, want more openness on the UFO subject to come out. Does that mean they want full disclosure? Damned if I know. You know, I did a book on this 13 years ago. And when my co-author Bryce Zabel and I game planned this whole thing out, I'll just say the one conclusion that we came to is that a genuine UFO disclosure is a truly revolutionary act, because it really opens up Pandora's box of questions about the ET presence here, if that is what they are, as well as other acts of secrecy that have occurred over the many years. So it's a big, messy thing, and it's very difficult for me to imagine how members of that establishment, if they've got any thought process going on here, why they would want to promote such a dramatic questioning of the authority and authenticity and legitimacy of the United States government, because I think this would potentially anger many people. I could be wrong. It could very well be that they've got enough narrative control over this that they can manage the situation. That is entirely possible. I do think if there's one mistake that we in the UFO community have made, and I'm including myself here over the years, is that it's very easy for us to overestimate the power of UFO-related revelations to the general public. I think what we are seeing is a very pronounced ability of the mainstream media to manage that narrative to a very great degree. So we will just see. There's one other amendment. I'm trying to get this right. I think Senators Mark Warner and Marco Rubio have a provision. I think this is part of the NDAA. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here, but which would automatically shut off funding to any unacknowledged special access programs that haven't been reported to Congress by that 300-day mark that I referred to earlier. And this is not something that I've heard much about in public discussion, but I think that's just another factor to keep in mind here. It wouldn't be the first time that members of Congress or the Senate have been at odds with elements of the national security community. So again, let's keep our finger on the pulse here. Last thing I want to say here, whatever is being discussed at this hearing, which as I'm speaking here is going to take place tomorrow, whatever will be discussed there, it's important to keep in mind that the UFO or the UAP reality is happening every single day. There is not a day that goes by around the world, within the United States and beyond, in which this phenomenon doesn't just blow the mind of any number of witnesses who see something that just cannot make sense within our worldview. One of my favorite subsets of UFO sightings these days are those crazy 2:30, 3 a.m. sightings that people will have over their own neighborhood, over their house, over their neighbor's house at an altitude of 200, 250 feet or what have you. They come outside, they see a nearly invisible saucer, a dark or a triangle hovering low silently that eventually just moves off. What is going on with those? You go to the National UFO Reporting Center, which I do on a regular basis, you'll find those types of cases. They happen. What is that? Or any number of other inexplicable types of UFO activity that, again, is recorded by ordinary people and by military people all the time. By my estimate, and all we can do here is estimate, but we are looking at many thousands of probably excellent, inexplicable sightings that happen around the world every year. How many thousands? Well, that's hard to know, but I think we're talking in the tens of thousands at a minimum every year. This is what I have come to believe when I look at the numbers and do my best to extrapolate out. Keep in mind, we have a lot of incomplete data on this phenomenon, but there is no question that we're looking at a significant, widespread phenomenon that is around the world, global. And it's not just over cities. It's not just over rural areas. It's not just in mountainous regions. It's not just in desert regions. It's not just in the oceans or the great bodies of water of this planet. Or it's not just in outer orbit or space. It's in all of those places. What technology, what civilization, society is able to do that and has been able to do that for minimum a full human lifetime? And really, when you go back through some very good cases in earlier times than that, there's a few out there. And it really, I think it's very difficult to conclude otherwise than that there has been a presence of an extraordinarily advanced, sophisticated society, probably not from here, that has been operating on this world for some time now. What are they doing? Maybe they don't have a nefarious goal. Maybe they do. We want to know these things, and we're really not talking about any of it. So Chris Mellon said this is a process. Yeah, I get that. But if it's a process, we had better not forget that there is a goal here at the end of this process, which is the whole truth, not a partial truth, the whole thing. And that is what the public at this point in history, we're well into the 21st century, we don't just deserve it, we actually need it. There's a lot going on in this world, and we are at a tipping point in more ways than one in terms of our global civilization and indeed our entire species. We damn well better figure this out fast. So if this is a process, let's hit the accelerator a little bit and try to get this thing moving as quickly and as completely as possible. And if it doesn't work within the political sphere, it is still up to good researchers out there to keep pushing and to pull that information out as best they can and to bring it before the public, bring it before our establishment in whatever powerful way that we can. That's where we're at. And I know there's folks out there saying, well, you can't believe the establishment for anything. And I'm one of those people. You can't. But the fact is they have a lot of power. That's our world. We don't have the kind of democratic utopia that some people like to think we do, if there's anyone out there who believes that. That's not our world. Donald Kehoe and folks in the 50s, they could believe that. We know better now. So we don't have that. We've got some kind of oligarchic, autocratic, bureaucratic technocracy going on. We all know this. And we don't like it, but we've got to be able to move that needle as best we can in the direction of truth. That's our job right now. Now, let's look for the bombshells to happen. There may be things going on here that are unpredictable that I have not foreseen. It wouldn't shock me in the least. What I will mention is that if you see this message before the hearings, check my Twitter feed. I'll have a link below, and I will be providing same-day reactions to the hearing myself. There's a lot of folks out there that will be doing it, but I will be as well. And you can check out my Twitter link below. I'll have it linked. So that will be happening. And then the other thing is Go, if you like what I do, go to my website, Richard Dolan Members. I have information there all the time. I'm constantly putting out information both for the public as well as for members. I got that both there, free and behind the paywall. You know how it works. Do check that out. If you like what I do here, hey, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, help me with the algorithm. You know the drill. That's really all I've got for you. We're living in a very interesting time. Whether this will be a huge breakthrough or a big nothing burger remains to be seen. I do think that there's some potential here, and we will have to see how it unfolds. With that, I will take my leave of you, and I wish you all a very excellent day wherever you are. Stick around for the next installment of this, because I'm sure I'll be coming back with more commentary about this. And with that, I will take my leave. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around. I'll catch you next time. Meanwhile, let's keep fighting the good fight. Later.